So it turns out there are these tools that actually help you think about the future. One is what I call the inexorables. There are some technologies, some trends that are going to happen, play out under any scenario. They're actually going to play out in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I call them the inexorables. They're inexorably going to happen. You can channel them a little bit, you can slow them down a bit, but they're going to happen. Now, there's all kinds of them, and I do a whole nother talk about this, but there's, we're going to touch on some of these. Like everybody on the planet's going to get connected. Universal connectivity. AI is going to be readily available to everybody at all times, very much in the next short time here. We're going to transition towards clean energies. We're going to move towards electric mobility. We're going to actually really refine our genetic understanding of how do we run, how do all living things run. We're going to be able to manipulate that so we can actually construct and tweak and evolve the human genome, but other genomes. And there's things like generational changes are absolutely going to happen. If someone's 20 years old now and 10 years are going to be 30, we can play those out. And we can play about how that's going to impact politics and other things. Anyhow, this is the inexorables in terms of maybe how it hits the America here. There's other ones too, though, globally, that are just going to happen. Climate change, I'm going to touch on that. There's a bunch of things here I could talk more about. We just don't have the time to do it. But I am going to touch on several of these inexorable developments that are happening and will continue to happen over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Now, that's inexorably happening. For you folks, the risk folks, there's another category that you really got to take into mind. So if human beings are crazy people, I mean, people, it's hard to figure out exactly what people are going to do. There's psychology, all kinds of things about humans that you can't predict with certainty. And so what happens in the field of strategic foresight is you got to think through all these different places, all these different areas of economics and politics and geopolitics, culture, society, what's going to play out? And that is a way that will impact any business plan, any kind of risk kind of plan that you folks are working at. You got to think with a big lens of what's going on. And there are techniques for that too. And they're called critical uncertainties is one of the ways we think about it. There are some things that are uncertain. Take a topic, could go this way, could go that way. If it's critical, we don't focus on all of them, but some of them are critical to your business or to what's going on. And what I'm going to do today, because you're the risk people, is I'm going to go through a bunch of these. And I'm going to tell you where I think they're going. And you don't have to believe me, but you can listen to me and think, what if he's right? Now, the biggest picture way to understand what I'm going to lay out here today is essentially we are going from a world that most people in this audience here, for the last 40 years of your career, has been defined by a certain set of systems, small systems that added up to a mega system. And that system, though, is essentially going to be increasingly, we're going to let go of that system. So, for example, for the last 40 years, our mega challenge had been climate change. Energy had been carbon energy. Transportation was the internal combustion engine. Culture was a very boomer-centric culture, both in the United States and also Europe and all over. Politics tend to be more conservative. Because of that, economics was more private sector-oriented. Capitalism was very stressing the shareholder. Work was physical. Production was industrial. We'd refined that over the last couple hundred years. And geopolitics, because of that, oil was in the Middle East, and we had to go to wars and all kinds of stuff around that to basically keep the oil going, then boom, boom, boom. That is a system we all get. That system, let's put on this side of the divide that I started the whole thing out, right? Now, there is another system that's getting built, a meta system that's essentially made up of all these smaller systems. I would argue the meta challenge of this era is basically going to be climate change. Energy is increasingly going to shift to clean. Transportation is going to go electric. We're going to go over a bunch of these things. The culture basically is more millennial-centric rather than boomer-centric. Politics is going to be, in kind of a historical context, more progressive, they would call this. The public sector is going to play a bigger role in economics, probably. Capitalism is going to be more broadened to kind of benefit all stakeholders. There's a lot of talk about that. Work is going to be not totally virtual, but going to be increasingly virtual in ways that we hadn't thought about before. Production is going to be more biological. We're going to grow things or tweak things to grow rather than actually build them in the classic industrial way. And geopolitics, from the point of view of the West, will be more Asia-oriented. Now, that world is essentially going over to this side. So we've essentially got this next decade, there is going to be a huge amount of shifting. And if you're in the risk business, this is something you're going to have to really figure out how to navigate. And the more quicker you understand that this is kind of going in the bigger picture, the easier your day-to-day job is going to be, I would argue. Again, hear me out. Now, there's another trick here in terms of the future about, oh, well, how can you actually think through the future around technologies? Well, there's a thing called the technology adoption curve, which is well understood here in the heart of technology world here. But essentially, every technology and ultimately every trend gets to a place where if it's successful, you go through innovators taking the new technology, early adopters that kind of pick it up earlier. There's an early majority starts to pick it up. Ultimately, you get the late majority, and you get the laggards eventually come through. That's all kind of understood as this happens over and over again. Not every technology does this, but the ones that are successful do. The key thing is that tipping point. When does that come? My business, my work is always trying to call that. And there's a way to think about that. And what makes that interesting is for a long time, a new technology, people think linearly, right? And so you think, well, there's this new thing, gosh, this mobile phone, it should actually work. Well, but no, and then you're disappointed for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it starts to pick up once that scaling starts to happen, and then boom, it just gets amazing how fast this stuff happens. And we've seen it again and again and again, which kind of brings up these paradigm shifts. Because a paradigm is the way the system works is built on the current technologies, the current ways people have educated, a bunch of things like that. The old thing will always hang on because people are certain, I get how it works, why would I want to let go? Then a new thing comes around, a new technology or a new kind of thing, like what if you did, let's say, got taxis to come through an app, and that's a cool idea, but you need enough people to try it out and go, oh my God, this is so much better than taxis. And then the whole thing kind of shifts, and there went the taxi industry, right? We've seen this again and again and again.